All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is ping identity in a public cloud and some lessons learned in doing that, right? So as Bill mentioned before, pretty much everything is moving to the cloud, and I'm going to talk about a few things that pretty much everyone's moving everything to the cloud right now. I've been working on a project for about the last year and 3-4 months or so that we're kind of wrapping up next week, and I'm going to talk through a bunch of lessons we learned doing that. We deployed a lot of Ping products and a lot of ancillary products on it, on AWS specifically, but in general, a public cloud environment. So I'm going to be talking through, different things that we learned along the way, things I wish we'd go back and have changed when we started this project. We've actually done a lot of smaller projects since we started this last year that we've used the lessons I'm going through in here to help accelerate those. But this is probably one of the bigger ones that we've been working on for about the last year. So quick agenda, brief introduction, define some need and key terminology, right? So when I talk public cloud, migration to the cloud, I generally look at it a little bit differently than a lot of people I talk with. Everyone's moving to the cloud or has some kind of cloud strategy, right? I want to lay some groundwork of when I say moving to a cloud native deployment, what I really mean there, right? Because there's some key differences, right? And then really jump into the lessons learned and a recommended approach. I'm trying to boil about a year and a couple months worth of content into 45 minutes. So I'll probably hit a lot of the key points. If you have any questions, you want me to dig into stuff, you want me to get down into ones and zeros of coding, of how to do a lot of the infrastructure as code, catch me. I'll show you all kinds of fun stuff. I've got a quick demo at the end of this that basically highlights a myopic view of one account and how we're actually interconnecting and deploying this entire stack, right? And then we'll talk of where to get started and some additional information. So you'll see the 0 to hero up there. This is kind of like a moniker for our project. And the big joke was, I said, well, we're going to do the 0 to hero and walk away, right? So we've got this thing all the way down and through the different kind of perils and challenges and stuff like that we've had over the last year that literally I check in my code to a branch. I go get a coffee, I handle some other meetings and everything else. And about 3-4 hours later, this is all done. I don't have to touch anything, right? And since we're doing this all infrastructure as code, once I check in my code to development, and then I check it into the next branch up and the next branch up and the next branch up, it's basically just handling itself as it goes all the way through, right? So we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it works. So that's really what I'm going to be going through today is kind of that approach, what we did, how we built it, and different challenges we ran into along the way. My name is Nick Hunt. How's everyone doing today? I'm the Director of Delivery for IDMWORKS. So if you think about IDMWORKS, all the individual consulting teams report to me. Me and another person, right? I'm still an engineer, I'm a builder, I'm an architect, developer, whatever you want to call it by heart. So I still get my hands dirty, and hopefully you hear my voice. I love doing this. I have a lot of fun doing this. So I've been doing this for 20 plus years or so. Anyone remember Slammer, Welshia, Blaster way back in the day? So I cut my teeth doing that stuff, right? I was a pen tester, malware, all kinds of fun stuff. Don't hold it against me. I was an auditor for a number of years, so you'll hear some concepts in here of, you're moving this stuff up to the cloud. Are you talking to your auditors? What are the impacts, right? How's this going to shift your audits and how you need to gather evidence? How are you accounting for all this stuff? So I always wear the auditor hat no matter what I do. I did it for a number of years, right? So you got to think about that. Consultant for a number of years. I was an IT security officer for a number of years. So I've sat on both sides of the table. And hopefully, I bring that perspective here with you guys. Like I said, catch me. I can talk about this stuff all day. So defining the need and key terminology, right? No matter what, cloud migrations are happening. Everyone I talk to, I don't think there's not a meeting I'm in that someone isn't saying, hey, we're moving to the cloud, or we're evaluating the cloud, or we're going through some kind of digital transformation, right? If you don't think it's happening, I would really start talking to people, right? It's happening somewhere. Like I said, if not 100%, 99% of the people I talk to, given the current climate, with the work from home and real estate and everything else, I see this accelerating right now, especially moving out of data centers, moving up to core providers. So definitely not something that's going away. Cost savings. The environment I'm going to talk about today was built for the worst case. They had huge stacks of systems that they may use 5% of it, right? They had to build it to account for the worst case. Versus what I'm going to be talking about today, moving to a cloud native deployment, you can build it for the minimum, your normal runtime, and basically enable it to auto scale on demand as you need, right? We've deployed, tested, all this stuff. It scales as soon as you need, and when you don't need it, it scales right back down again, right? You're paying for what you need, not for worst case, or if your worst case changes and it fails and you need to rebuild it, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Plan for failure. Failure is not a bad thing. So a well-architected architecture should fail, and it should fail in different ways, right? Scaling down is technically a failure. You're taking stuff away. But you build this right, it'll fail the right way and recover, and no one's the wiser, right? Multi-region, multi-zone, scale up, scale down. These are all different things that you should plan for, and honestly, don't worry about it. Plan for failure. Everything works the way it should. No one knows the difference, right? And then use your resources and people where needed. Build more functionality. So this is one of the main drivers of the project that we're talking about today. They had teams and teams and teams that maintained their private cloud infrastructure, right? Moving to a public cloud, I keep on mentioning AWS, and I'll just say it, right? Moving to AWS in this case, Azure, GCP, whatever you're going to move to, takes all that out of the equation, right? So you no longer have all these infrastructure people that need to maintain this. You can just focus on the app functionality that you need. Let the cloud and the provider handle everything under the covers. You deploy this the right way. The infrastructure is kind of inherently built in your project, right? So key terminology, cloud native versus instance deployments. This is kind of the thing I usually latch onto when I'm talking to people is like, oh yeah, we're moving to the cloud. Oh, cool, what are you guys doing, right? Well, we're just standing up EC2 instances, moving our apps up and everything. It's like, well, are you really moving to a cloud or are you just moving to a colo type thing? What we're going to be talking about here is more cloud native, leveraging containerization, infrastructure as code, automation, letting the cloud functionality actually enable your business, not just kind of standing up instances where you have the same processes and infrastructure that you need to maintain. Ping Cloud versus customer managed versus IDaaS. So Ping has a great cloud that you can go sign up and run Ping Federate, Ping Access, everything in their cloud, right? They've got Ping One if you want the IDaaS, versus a customer managed private cloud or in a public cloud scenario. So they're all differences, have their use cases, benefits. Depending on which route you want to go, evaluate it and look what's going to work best for you. In this case, it has to be customer managed. They've got Ping Fed, Ping Access, Ping Directory, Ping Data Gov, and about 10, 15 applications supporting all that infrastructure to provide one service. So the Ping Cloud and IDaaS really wasn't an option. They needed a feature-rich, customer-managed cloud deployment. Kubernetes, Kate, Cube versus container runtimes. Honestly, I've done both. I've done EC2 with Docker on top of it, managed container runtimes, everything else. Pick what's going to work best for you. I prefer the Kubernetes or Kate approach just because of the orchestration and the networking, but at the same time, there's a layer of complexity there that maybe your team isn't equipped for or that you don't need. A container runtime will do the same thing. It's just a different hosting model, right? Persistence and replication. So no matter what you do, a lot of people I talk to that are doing cloud native deployments, they're basically shoving into container runtime and saying, all right, we're up and running, right? Well, in an identity management world, there's data that you need to maintain across those deployments, right? So plan for, how are you going to persist that data? Is it database, file systems, whatever it may be, plan that into your deployment. How are you replicating that across regions and zones? What's your backup recovery strategy and everything else? The last bullet here, and sorry for the nerdiness there, I'm not going to make product recommendations. Depending on your environment, depending on your skill sets, depending on what you want to do, this environment is so rapidly changing right now that a little over a year ago when we were doing this versus a couple months ago versus a conversation I had with a coworker last night, I'm constantly learning of new tools that are getting built to enable and do this type of stuff. What I used I wish we had done some things differently at the time when we originally started this. You know, it may work for me, it may not work for you, right? There's a ton of products in here, and I don't want to stand up here and say, oh, you need to use this product and everything else. If you want to talk to me, I'll give you some options in terms of what I've seen work, but at the same time, you know, I'm not here to make a product recommendation other than paying. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so lessons learned and approaches. Setting the stage a little bit. So this is an IDMWORKS customer that I've been working with, and me and my team, for a little over a year. We actually technically started with a proof of concept. As Bill mentioned, I got a call, I had a conversation with this customer, and basically they're like, well, we're running all this stuff in a private cloud, we're not even sure this is gonna work. You know, we've been told it won't work. I'm stubborn, and basically said, challenge accepted, and ran, right? So we went through that POC, we built it on Kubernetes, got everything up and running, we validated it, everything else, and basically once we were done with that, you know, we moved into full deployment kind of last summer, right? You know, that customer is more of a consumer focused, right? So they do have some enterprise or workforce users in this infrastructure, but for the most part, they're a central service for all the applications this company develops as a login endpoint. So they federate with a ton of different institutions, you know, multiple millions of users, multiple ping, a lot of custom apps, and they're moving from a private OpenStack to AWS essentially in this case, right? In terms of deployments, I said 20 plus. If I looked at all the different stages and waves and everything else we're deploying, it's probably closer to 50 different deployments from a pipeline perspective, but individual like ECR repositories and, you know, code bases is about 20 or so, right? We did this across 6 different AWS accounts, so using well-architected principles. We started with a deploy account, right? Which that's where all of our logic, our ownership, all of our security lives. Then we've got individual workload accounts all fenced from each other, right? So central account owns it, workload runs it, essentially is the architecture we went with. And then, you know, from a usage perspective, this company is an app dev team. So all the individual teams all leverage this central service, you know, from an infrastructure perspective, but they don't run on the same infrastructure or the same accounts. This is all fenced from each other. They've got a single endpoint, which is a URL they hit, they can do everything they need, right? They don't have any back channel communication, any of that type of stuff. We provide a service to them. You know, from an account structure, like I said, we started with a root account, which is our deploy account you'll see in my screens and everything here. Then we've got the individual life cycles. So, you know, we start with dev, test, load, staging, and then our production environment essentially, right? And based on our deployment model, it just kind of rotates through those as we're pushing changes. So let's get into lessons learned. This was probably my biggest pain point, is I mentioned I was given a challenge, we went and executed, right? We did this POC on what we tentatively called our V1 account, right? So I did it in Kubernetes, yay, everything's up and working, right? And then we essentially said, we're gonna start architecting all this stuff, and cloud services, us, a couple of different teams, basically all started working at once, right? So they were defining the security while we were trying to deploy on top of it. None of us were talking. You know, I was running into all kinds of issues with SCPs and policy violations and everything else, right? So lesson learned number 1, stop. Stop and plan this out. Because I spent a lot of time just fighting random errors of basically stuff that was getting enforced and blocked on me, right? So stop for a second. Plan out your policy, your architecture, your infrastructure, your application deployment. Everyone working at once is chaos. Everyone can work at once, but at least communicate and have a plan of who's doing what, when it's coming, right? And the last thing is don't just start clicking away. You know, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Give me a fresh account, I'll start working, right? But as soon as you start clicking away and you start drifting away from that infrastructure as code, 1, you can't replicate it because I can't remember what I did yesterday. 2, if I start deleting things, your infrastructure as code starts failing, and then you're like, what's going on, right? So don't just start clicking away. Actually plan this stuff out. Test often, test always. Test. Everywhere you go, you know, you should have tests embedded in all this, from your initial code check-in to initial deployment to once you get things up and running, before you finally release it, run some more tests just to make sure. The process works, right? It's all binary. So you push it, it works. But at the same time, you should test and tell yourself, yep, it actually did work, right? So that's all the runtime stuff. Actually getting it into your environment, make sure you plan out to run different benchmarks. So what is your normal cost, right? Day to day, we run at X. So this is going to be my cost per month, right? Versus when we need to scale, heavy usage periods and everything else, here's the cost associated with that. What are my build costs? What are my general maintenance costs and everything else to actually run this infrastructure? That different stuff. How do I scale up and down? When do I scale up and down? How long does it take to scale up and down? What metrics do I start scaling on and everything else, right? These are good kind of precursors, good and bad, that something's going on in your environment. And when I say good and bad, good, it starts scaling, right? For a certain reason, you got heavy usage. But that also could be bad. I've got friends and we've ran into use cases that there was an attack going on, it started scaling, it just kept on scaling, and costs started going way crazy, right? So plan this stuff. When are you scaling? Why is it scaling? Different stuff like that. What are your edge and upper limits? Do you want to set edge and upper limits, right? How far can you push this infrastructure before it fails? By the way, we haven't been able to push it to this point yet. I'm hoping later this year we're going to contract with a very large global provider to basically launch a DOS against this as much as we can to see if we can get it to fail, because I want to know how far we can go, right? What are you doing around chaos? I've got a rogue administrator. I've got an inadvertent change that got pushed in the environment. Things are shutting down randomly. What's going on? What's that infrastructure look like, right? There's great tools out there in the community that are free that you can basically point them at your environment and say, have fun. Launch a load test and then launch a chaos test behind the scenes. What happens, right? What does that look like for your environment? Focus on the developer experience. This is a challenge moving to the cloud, right? Because, as a developer, at least a traditional mindset, right? You're expected to write an app, right? That sits on top of a server. But the developer in a cloud native deployment is now your infrastructure administrators, your actual app developers. You got operations people, and they could all be the same person because you're embedding all this code in terms of how you run it, build it, everything else in your project, right? So the tooling around that should support them to do that. There's a lot of open source tools out there. There's paid tools to run these types of things. Some leave a lot to be desired in terms of the interface, how you interact with it, how you do reviews and approvals. You can add a lot of time just by not having a good developer experience, right? So as you're actually planning this stuff out, plan how the developer is going to interact with this environment, right? How are you enabling them to do their job? I'm a bit of an old school person, so I use VS Code. I don't use a lot of the kind of advanced IDEs, but there's a ton of extensions that can accelerate, right? And I can plug stuff into different public providers. In this case, we actually went all AWS native, so we're using code commit, code build, code pipeline, right? It works. Does it leave a lot to be desired? Yes. Other public tools out there probably integrate a bit better and provide a better experience, but at the same time, it's one of those lessons learned that we went through. Use existing public repositories and information available, right? Ping has a great DevOps site that, you're just getting started deploying Ping, do from Ping in terms of all your base Docker files, right? You still need to do a persistent volume and mounts and everything else, but why reinvent the Ping deployment? Ping's already got one out there. Start from Ping, right? There's tons of other ancillary tools and everything else that you can integrate into containers in these deployments. To reiterate what Bill said, definitely test these things before you integrate them into your pipelines, because you could do inadvertently deploying things. But at the same time, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. There's a ton of development in this space right now. There's a ton of resources out there. There's a ton of guidance, right? So I'm pointing at the Ping DevOps site, their GitHub site on the bottom there too. Go read their site. They've got great resources out there in terms of what they're doing in their cloud. So I leveraged a lot of their stuff initially when I was kind of planning this stuff out, and it really helped. They've already done it once. I can at least take and latch on to what they did and extend it based on our use cases. So any questions on this stuff before I go on? I know I'm kind of moving fast. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. Any questions so far? No? All right. So as I mentioned, I am a security guy first. So security first approach and plan for security costs. This is probably one of the biggest pain points I run into with a lot of people is, yay, we're deploying a security tool. Well, how are you embedding security in that security tool you're deploying, especially given the infrastructure that you're going to be running this on? A lot of the old school security guys that I talk to are like, well, we're never going to go to the cloud because that's the keys to our kingdom, right? I disagree with that. You can embed security in your security deployment to provide some more infrastructure, right? And that's really what I want to talk about here. There's a ton of good guidance out there. There's frameworks, standards that are coming out that you can use, right? So cloud security principles, you got NIST, CSA, CI security. You've got AWS well-architected architecture. GCP's got theirs. Azure's got their best practices and everything on their site. There's a ton of stuff out there to embed security in your deployment, right? Plan for SSO, your IAM strategy, your MFA strategy for this infrastructure, right? In this case, we're deploying, obviously, SSO infrastructure, but to get into the environment to manage it, we still need to control all that, right? We didn't want to have persistent developer accounts and everything else sitting out there. We wanted to make it, truly role-based. We used all the ephemeral, SSO access, so technically no person has credentials in our accounts. You have an SSO role that you get assigned to on access that is short-lived. I think ours was 8 hours, right? So you log in the morning, you set up your tokens, all your COIs, and then you've got 8 hours, essentially to do your work. That goes into everything we're doing, right? So I mentioned all my pipelines and everything else I'm doing. Same rules apply. So as part of my pipelines, I need to check out credentials. I need to reach into other accounts. I need to basically assume different roles to do my work. That was all kind of planned out. Policy enforced at all levels and tested. Like I said, this was a pain point I had that we were enforcing it. I was the one testing it because I was running into the errors, right? So, definitely assign policy at all levels. Log everything. It costs money, yes, but at the same time, when you need it, when you need to go back, especially if something happens, make sure you have it. There's great tools, third party that you can, normalize data coming out of AWS. You can use their tools. Azure's got their own, logging infrastructure and tools. GCP, same thing, right? Just make sure you build logging, that you're at least writing the data somewhere, right? And then build tools to essentially normalize and be able to review it. Secrets and automated tools. So this was a big challenge we ran into. We were moving from a private cloud to a public cloud. Everywhere I went, within code repos, within their deployment scripts, I saw passwords, right? So now we're moving all this stuff up to a public cloud with all these passwords in it, right? So we had to really plan out and say, okay, we're going to start doing secure secrets in SSM. We're going to use Secret Manager, and we're going to use all this ephemeral-based, just-in-time access when we need to do things, right, using IAM roles. So that took quite a while to plan all this stuff up and make the updates. Encryption and data protection, make sure you're planning, as it's going across the wire, you are in a public environment now. So the old concepts of, well, I don't need SSL because it's all on my private network, no one's going to be able to sniff this traffic. No, you're running on a public backbone at this point. You need to encrypt everything, right? The security guys that say, well, we can't do IDS and IPS because it's encrypted, there are means to decrypt that traffic via securely sharing keys and stuff, right? So plan for encryption and data protection. Control access through automation and policy. I've run into a number of instances that through automation and policy that we didn't have the right stuff in place, that someone was working in a higher level account and said, well, I messed up, I'm just going to start deleting things. Well, they deleted the wrong things, right? So we had to essentially step back and say, okay, well, you have developer or admin rights to development only, right? You can check in your data to higher level repos and let everything run. You don't have access to the actual console to do things. So plan for multi-region, multi-zone. I know the prevailing wind and general guidance and everything else is planned for multi-cloud, different providers. There's a level of complexity that goes into multi-cloud deployments, from the networking, just general terminology, runtime, everything else, right? I'd focus on multi-region first, maybe tackle the multi-cloud later. Yes, I've had a number of issues over the last year with AWS and outages and everything else that even a multi-region approach didn't help because they are global services, but at the same time, that's on the provider to fix, right? You can still do minimal downtime across regions and kind of localized issues that even in some of those cases, a multi-cloud wouldn't have fixed because they're backbone providers. So rather than add to the complexity, just focus on multi-region, multi-zone. Sorry, this is my local sonar. I run stuff at home, but infrastructure as code, automate everything. This is where it really gets fun, right? Sitting for a couple hours just writing shell scripts and stuff like that using CLI components, yeah, you could get it done, but at the same time, is it really infrastructure as code, right? Or sitting at a console with a run script or a run book saying, all right, click here, click here, click here. That stuff doesn't work, especially in these types of environments where you need it repeatable or you need to hand it off to different people, right? So automate everything. And when I say automate everything, there's always going to be one action that starts the automation. And there might be a few things in between that you need to do manual approvals or some kind of step, right? But as much as possible, try to automate everything. Pick a platform and run with it. Don't get caught in analysis paralysis. Terraform, CDK, the Pulumi, Helm. I mean, there's a ton of frameworks out there that are doing just this. We were talking about Vagrant last night because I'm trying to figure out a dev use case, right? Pick a platform and run with it. In my case, I'm using CDK, which is just CloudFormation, but Terraform, other platforms all work well, right? So infrastructure build and runtime, basically automate all that infrastructure. I commented on the zero to hero. Basically at this point, the way we're working is you give me an account number in a region, I run one command to bootstrap it, I check in my code and I walk away, right? So that's all done. Plan for ancillary infrastructure, capabilities and integrations, right? So in this case, they run everything in a private cloud, right, this particular customer, but as we started moving things up, we said, well, shoot, you've got API gateways now, you've got other enforcement points natively within the infrastructure that we can integrate with, right? So think of like a Cognito use case in AWS. Cognito can use external providers from an integration perspective, right? So developers want to use Cognito because there's tons of native libraries. Cool, why not? Integrate it with Ping behind the scenes, right? That's a central service. So API gateways, you want custom enforcement points rather than doing custom stuff inside of apps. Enforce it at the infrastructure level, right? You can build all this stuff in and provide these types of services to people. Private cloud versus public cloud, it's really up to you, right? In this case, it was a public cloud deployment. I know VMware has their own private clouds, Oracle has private clouds, everything else, right, with their managed hardware and services. My big discussion or lesson learned here is the pool of resources available to help you with this is much, much larger on the public cloud side than on a private cloud. Like I said, my customer ran OpenStack, and people that know that are few and far between, so they were having challenges just retaining staff to maintain this versus public cloud. There's all these people that are doing it right now, right? Watch out for rate limits. We had a lot of issues with this initially, so I check in my code and it starts going. All the AWS API rate limits were kicking up, basically like, no, you can't do this, right? You're allowed 100, 1,000 API requests per minute or whatever, right? So initially, we were like, yay, it works. And then we started running into all these issues. So make sure you do a few dry runs on this type of stuff. I would say do X times 0.5 or 1.5, in terms of those rate limits, in terms of your planning and everything. There's actually embedded service limits from different infrastructure services in AWS. I think like their API gateways have rate limits, just inbound traffic, there's rate limits. If you're going to do all this huge testing, make sure you try to test those and find them. Any questions on any of this? I know I've got a ton of different product names on here, but Yes, no? All right. So lessons learned, don't go it alone. There's a ton of resources out there, from a partner perspective, people that are doing this, to the community. Like I said, AWS has great forums, Azure has great forums, Google. I use Stack Overflow a ton. Like I'm a normal developer, go search Stack Overflow, right? There's tons of people out there doing this. Definitely don't try to go it alone. Leverage what's out there. DevOps is a cultural shift. It takes time. Don't expect this overnight. A lot of people I talk to are, we're going DevOps. And then tomorrow they're like, well, how come you're not doing this yet? It takes time. People are used to doing things the way they've always done it. As you take rights away from them in terms of infrastructure and everything's as code, building all that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of code for that matter. So, like I said, plan for failure. So you're going to get all this, it's going to look really cool at the end of the day, and then someone's going to click a button and it's going to fail, right? So try to force your failures as much as you can. What happens when I get rid of all my developers? If someone embedded credentials in a deployment, what happens, right? So plan for these types of things. Make sure you're not going to run into this during your peak sales period or peak usage period. Plan for managed services where possible. Pretty much every cloud provider has managed services, whether that's Prometheus, the Elasticsearch stuff for logging, Ansible, Chef. They've all got these managed services that you can leverage. You don't need to run it yourself. Leverage the managed services as much as you can, right? They maintain it, you just leverage it as a service. IDMWORKS, we do this. We've got a number of deployments out in AWS. I'm actually working on kind of automating a bunch of our stuff. So if you come to our, lightweight automation framework, Sean? LAF? Lifecycle automation, yeah. I'm working on a lot of that stuff behind the scenes, which is all going to be running on similar infrastructure. So this is, at the end of the day, this is what things look like, right? So this is one environment, right? So essentially, we've got our root account. I check in my code to my workload control repo, which is what we call it, right? Which basically starts this whole process. So I check it into development. It starts this process. At that point, the build essentially kicks up, right? So it goes through its own build process, its self-update process, because pipelines are awesome and they self-mutate as you make changes. You don't need to redeploy things. They'll just kind of pick up changes, right? From there, I've got a bootstrap stage that essentially reaches out to the target account I'm working in that lays some ground infrastructure. Really, that's a repo to store code assets and a bunch of configuration parameters, essentially, right? Like, hey, I'm setting up the account to get ready to go. Once that's done, I essentially kick up another pipeline, which, I check in code to my actual, what I'm deploying in a target account, right? So these are all my apps and containers. So I kick up another pipeline that picks it up from my deploy account, grabs that code, it runs a build, and it actually publishes it to my target account. So as I check in code going forward to my workload deploy there, that upper left pipeline, it's picking up that stuff, it's running its local tests, making sure everything's good to go, and it's constantly publishing to my target account as I make changes, right? So this is just by nature of checking in code. Once I get that done, I essentially reach out to the target account and I say, okay, lay down the infrastructure. This is going to be all my load balancers, any instances I'm going to need, a bunch of configuration parameters that are target account specific, different stuff like that, right? Same thing, it goes through a build and self-update. I go through a bunch of stage deployments. Here's everything I'm deploying. And essentially at that point, I say, okay, now I'm going to actually deploy my containers that are providing the services. In our case, we've got 2 active clusters in all of our environments. We've got a blue and green deployment for minimal downtime approaches, right? We're not using the native blue-green deployments because of the amount of stuff we need to deploy, but we run independent clusters on each side. So once the infrastructure is laid down, the blue-green kicks up, and essentially they grab from the same source repo, they do their updates, and they deploy the entire stack behind it, right? At the end of the day, once it hits that final stage, I'm done, right? I need to redeploy something, I just check it into the workload deploy, and it kind of works its way through the pipeline. Yeah.
So your other, where you go source build publish, that's under root.
Yep.
Is that basically
Yep. So I've got tests built into the build and self-update scripts that basically run through a battery of tests like, hey, am I inadvertently disabling, enabling, adding services, different stuff like that. If one of those fail, the whole process stops.
Okay, all right. That's
Yep.
why I was just trying to like, that's
Yep.
what fits the rest. Okay.
Yep. So that's initial code, quality scans and tests and everything else, right? Within the stages and deployments here, we do pre and post deployments as well that run different scripts, from either a container health check to actual scripts that reach out to web services that are running to basically say, yep, I'm up and going, I'm healthy, move on to the next stage, right? These ones specifically, I've got an environment, an infrastructure, and like 10 waves behind there that we've got everything staggered and ordered based on dependencies. So like some SQS then we've got ping directory, and then we've got, it'd be ping fed next, and then a bunch of other supporting apps that are all behind that, right? Everything's kind of staggered, tested, and everything else between things. So it's kind of boring to watch, but it's kind of cool. Where to start? Time check. All right. So define the need. You want to go to the cloud, right? You've been told we're going to the cloud, depending on the use case, right? Why? Where are you deploying? What are desired goals for going to the cloud? Who are you supporting in going to the cloud, right? Set all that stuff up front, right? I'm a pie in the sky guy. I'm a dreamer. So I love having these conversations of, cool, you're going to the cloud. Why? Well, I was told. Well, what's the end goal here? Is it because, you've got a hardware refresh that's going to cost millions of dollars and you want to move out to the cloud? Are you getting out of your data center? You want to be more nimble? Sit down and have fun with it. Back of the napkin conversation here. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this, right? What resources do you have available? Who on your team can do this today or knows this stuff, right? What partners do you have that know this stuff, can at least kind of kickstart your process, get you going, right? What impact is this going to have? So security, hey, I've got everything locked in my data center. I've got a great firewall sitting in front of it. I'm moving everything out to the cloud. What's that impact, right? You start doing multiple subnets, you start doing ACLs between subnets, you follow kind of a laid out architecture from a VPC. This example that we deployed here, I have no access to anything outside of my stack, right? So if I need to get to stuff, I need to have routes behind the scenes, right? So what security impact is this move going to have? 9 times out of 10, I talk to people, they're like, well, yeah, it just works in our data center. But there's a back channel database call, back channel web services call that someone wrote into an app somewhere that you move this out to these types of deployments, it's going to fail because you didn't know about it, right? So definitely go through the exercise of what impact compliance. Do you guys go through audits all the time? What kind of reporting and logging and just general checks that you need to build into this so that you can maintain your compliance? I was a PCI auditor for a lot of years, right? So if you go through your rocks or what they called AOCs now, attestation on compliance every year, what impact is that going to have on this? What kind of controls do you need to put in place so that you can maintain that? What business priorities are you guys looking to scale, right? You got a big launch coming, you need to be able to support that. How's that going to help? And then people. This is kind of a touchy subject sometimes, but you take away the infrastructure guys are going to be like, where am I in this picture, right? So definitely think about that. Check out previous presentation by Bill. You guys, most people here were, for that presentation, but definitely set this all up in a roadmap. Like, we're just getting started. What's the end goal? How do you get there in between? What are those individual steps, right? Lay that out, when you're going to get there, how you're going to get there, who you're going to use. Then the last thing, have fun. Like, I love doing this. I love talking to people about this. I work too much on this stuff, but have fun doing it because it is a process, right? If you get burnt out and you don't have fun with it, it's just going to get boring. Yeah.
So were you able to do this all with like infrastructure as a service, or did you rely on any cloud services as well?
This is all native on AWS, everything we did here, right? So we used CDK as our scripting framework, right, which is just a front end for CloudFormation. So we wrote everything up front. basically check everything in, and then via CDK and its deployment model, it deploys everything through CloudFormation and some custom resources that we built and stuff like that. So that's kind of the infrastructure side of it, the deployment, right? On the app side of it, we've got code commit, code build, and code deploy jobs that essentially pick up the ping Federate images, the ping access images, all the custom adapters that we do, build those, drop them in ECR. Once that ECR update happens, it basically picks up those and starts deploying code through the environment, the actual deployed containers.
Okay, where I was going with that was this kind of fine line when you have to do a DR test.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in control of everything, like, with infrastructure as a service, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start relying on, cloud services or something like that, and it's like, okay, that doesn't work, and then you fail your SOC. You can't, well, you can't go as deep on a DR, type of test.
Mm-hmm. So DR, BCP, HOS, Holistic Organizational Survival, right? Depending on who you follow. You plan for failure, plan a multi-region, you replicate things across regions and everything else. A DR could be just shut down a region, right? Yeah. What's your impact? You're replicating things, but the one thing we did run into, and I 100% agree with this, is our deploy account, right? Our root account that has all of our logic, all of our code, everything, right? What happens if that goes away? That's one of the things we're working through right now is how do we recover all of our code commit repos, all of our code pipelines? How do we redeploy this stuff? One of the challenges with infrastructure as code is it's not hyper contextually aware, right? So I redeploy all my pipelines in a new root account, but everything's still technically in the target account that I'm deploying. It'll start failing, right? Because it says, hey, you've already done this, like I can't do anything. So we need to plan for that type of stuff. Yep.
The more like cloud services or the more stuff you rely on that, let's say, Amazon or Azure provides, and they have an outage, and it's kind of like you're somewhat out of the driver's seat with your DR plan or whatnot.
Yep. Yep.
You have to go through SOC, compliance for
Yep.
DR tests.
That's where like multi-cloud kind of concepts and everything come in. You hypothetically, if one cloud provider is having a problem, others may not be. I wouldn't say that's always 100% the case. What was the big routing provider in, was it Louisiana or something like that had an outage last year? Ended up taking down like half of the cloud providers. The Cloudflare outage here last week, different stuff like that. You can plan for all this stuff, and at the end of the day, sometimes you're not in control. So, yeah, I didn't mean to mention Cloudflare and bad. But, I mean, this stuff happens. Funny story, I was like right in the middle of one of these big deployments last November. I literally checked in my code and said, all right, I'm going to walk away for a second, and it's spinning, and basically US East 1 went down. That's when they had that their global outage on the US East 1, which is where all Route 53 and all IAM runs from. So literally, I freaked out for about an hour, like, oh geez, what did I do? It was AWS, but just bad timing. So, like I said, you guys want to talk code, infrastructure, what I deployed, catch me. I can talk about this stuff a ton. This is very AWS centric, but I can talk about other providers too. So, cool. Yeah.